Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Morning and Glory video. In today's episode, we are going to be taking a look at the IKEA Flat Pack Trench Network System of the Imperial Guard, the Aegis Defense Line. This unit has received quite the glow up in the new Imperial Guard Codex, and I believe that the majority of the Warhammer 40k community have overlooked this unit and they are sleeping on it big time. In fact, I would go so far as to say that I believe the Aegis Defense Line might even become a go-to, maybe even an auto-include unit for a lot of Imperial Guard commanders going forward. And with that extremely bold claim made, let's stand to repel, hold the line, and dive right into today's episode. Now, just in case you're new to the Guard and you're not sure what the hell an Aegis Defense Line is, the Codex describes it thusly. Aegis defense lines are barricades comprising crenellated armored panels that link together in a solid shield wall. Thanks to their simple design, they can be built and deployed at great speed, and are thus ideal for establishing defensive perimeters before more permanent structures can be erected. That is a very fancy way of saying it's a wall. It's a big old wall, basically. Now, looking at the Aegis defense line stats, you might be forgiven for thinking that this unit is completely useless. Because stats, it has no stats. Its movement, weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, toughness, wounds, attacks, leadership, and save are all dash. They're not even zero. They're just dash. They don't exist. The wall cannot move. The wall will not fight you. The wall has no leadership. The wall cannot be destroyed. It has no save value. Instead, what the wall basically does is provide you with a terrain feature that comes with a bunch of interesting terrain characteristics. It comes with defense line, light cover, heavy cover, defensible. They're all interesting features. Basically, it's a wall that you can hide behind. And most importantly, it comes with a special ability called Reinforced Construction. Each time a ranged attack is allocated to a model while it's receiving the benefits of cover from this terrain feature, worsen the armor penetration characteristic of that attack by 1 to a minimum of 0. Wait, hold up, hang on a second. That sounds awfully like Armor of Contempt with extra steps. Now, if you're a recent player, a very recent player to Warhammer 40k, you might be thinking, what the bloody hell is Armor of Contempt? Morning Glory, have you gone insane? Armor of Contempt was a rule that was part of the previous Grand Tournament pack of Warhammer 40k, basically the previous season of play. And what it did is it gave everyone in power armor the ability to reduce incoming attacks by 1. Now, that meant if you were hit by an AP -1 attack, that attack became AP 0. That meant if you got hit by an AP -2 attack, it became AP -1, and so on and so forth. It basically meant that whatever attack was hitting you, it always had its AP reduced by 1. Now, that didn't mean you could have an AP 0 attack suddenly give you +1 save. It always just reduced it to a minimum of 0. Armor of Contempt was a huge durability boost to armies like Space Marines, Sister Battle, and other power armored forces, and it was widely considered to be one of the most frustrating rules to deal with because it just made playing games of 40k such a bloody slog because you were constantly trying to just chew through these units that were just unreasonably tough. As a result, Games Workshop eventually took the rule out, and to replace it, they gave Space Marines and many other factions sweeping point cuts to the point where now Space Marines can widely be considered almost a horde army. That was how powerful Armor of Contempt was. GW needed to basically cut the points of Marines by a fifth to make up for the fact that they were taking this rule away from them. In fact, there's only one faction left that has an Armor of Contempt-like rule baked into their army rules, and that is the Leagues of Votann. And they are widely considered to be just very frustrating to play against because of how damn durable they are with their Void Armor reducing all the incoming AP. I recently played a game against them, and you really notice how potent reducing AP by 1 is when you're facing off against an army which has got it, and for a while you've actually been playing against armies that didn't have it. You really remember, oh god, this is how it felt to play into Armor Contempt. Jesus Christ! And so this is what made me start thinking about the Aegis Defense Line. Because the Aegis Defense Line essentially allows you to add in the Armor of Contempt rule to your army. Now, it's not going to affect all of your units. Only your infantry can take advantage of this. Vehicles don't really interact with terrain rules in Warhammer 40k all that much. But being able to add Armor of Contempt to a large part of your infantry force is a significant durability boost to your army. And if there's one thing that Guard does really well, it's taking a lot of infantry. Most Guard armies have a solid core of 60, 70, 80, maybe even 100 infantry that really provides them with a lot of boots on the ground. And the thing is, this Age defense line is actually quite long. Once you string it all the way out and you get the maximum coverage from it, it's pretty easy to get 20 or 30 infantry behind it. And at a stretch, you could probably even get 40. Now, I know there are going to be a few people out there going, all right, Morning Glory, it's kind of interesting, but Guardsmen are only toughness 3. They've only got a 5+ armor save. Realistically, even if they're reducing AP by 1, the majority of them are just going to get blown away in a heartbeat, right? I actually don't think that's true, because the Guard has access to lots of other tools that you can stack with the Age defense line to start making your line infantry unreasonably durable. And that is the goal. We want to really embody that spirit of Armor of Contempt. We want to make our infantry frustratingly, annoyingly difficult for the enemy to clear out. You see, quite simply, my good sir, the Age defense line not only provides you with that reduction in AP, but it also gives you light cover as standard. That means straight away, suddenly your Guardsmen are up to a 4+ armor save. You might have heard me say a number of times on this channel that a 4+ save isn't that good. That is true, but a 4+ save reducing AP by 1 is suddenly a lot more durable. On top of that, there's nothing stopping you from issuing these squads the Take Cover order. Take Cover gives you the benefit of light cover, unless you're already receiving the benefits of light cover. Then you get to receive the benefits of dense cover as well. Suddenly your standard Guardsman has gone from a 5+ save and nothing else to a 4+ save, reducing AP, and he's -1 to hit as well. But wait, there's more, because we're just looking at this from the perspective of a generic Guardsman profile, something like an infantry squad or a Cadian shock trooper squad. Pretty good units, but they're not the only things we have access to in our codex. What about things like Death Korps of Krieg? They come inbuilt with mini transhuman. Suddenly, toughness 3 isn't such a big deal anymore, because you have a bunch of infantry which are lying behind this Age defense line. They're on a 4+ save, they only get wound on 3s or better, they reduce the AP, they're -1 to hit. It's all starting to stack up into a very, very durable line of blokes. And if we indulge ourselves for a second and we step outside of the troop choices and start looking at some of our elite choices, then we can start thinking about things like Kasrkin. Now, a unit of Kasrkin sat behind this Age defense line are going to go up to a 3+ save and have all of the other benefits as well. But don't forget that Kasrkin can use Cadia stands. If you really need that unit to hold, maybe it has to defend an objective against some incoming serious enemy firepower, being able to slap Cadia stands on them is definitely not a bad idea. Also, don't forget that Kasrkin can take an extra regimental doctrine, and you could put industrial efficiency on these boys. Industrial efficiency allows you to ignore AP -1. Stacking that with the Age defense line starts getting kind of crazy, because it means that if you are hit with an AP -2 attack, that -2 attack becomes AP -1, and then industrial efficiency kicks in, and it becomes AP 0, which means unless someone is hitting you with a plasma gun or better, you're going to be on a 3+ save with those Kasrkin. I know it's not the most common use of Kasrkin. Most people want to use them with the Kasrkin bomb, or they also want to use them with the Kasrkin mechanized push unit. But a lot of people do like to include 3 full units of Kasrkin in their army, but they tend to find that third unit doesn't really have much purpose, much play. If you are already considering taking an Age defense line, having a unit of Kasrkin with industrial efficiency gives you an actual purpose and a game plan for that third unit of Kasrkin, and they don't just suddenly become slightly more expensive line infantry without a real special purpose. But I hear you say, Mordian Glory, those units like Krieg and Kasrkin, they want to be getting up close and personal. They want to be using their melter guns and their rapid fire plasma guns. This is true. Therefore, enter left from stage the Scion Death Ball. Now, the Scion Death Ball is a tactic that I've come up with, which I find to be just unbelievably powerful. I've done a video on it. I will do my best to try and remember to link it at the end of this one in the end screen. In summary, how it works is you take 30 Scions, you combine that with the Scion Warlord trait Drill Commander, and that allows all of your Scions to fire maximum rapid fire shots from any range. That's right, you can fire 2 shots from your plasma gun from a 24-inch range. It doesn't matter, it's double tapping at all ranges. If you were to take a Scion Deathball and combine it with an Aegis Defense Line, you're going to have a bunch of Scions that are going to be very, very difficult to deal with, and their long-range firepower is going to be just as potent. I honestly think this is where the Aegis Defense Line shines, especially if you are combining it with the Scion Deathball. This is because Scions tend to have this turn where they step out and they blast the enemy off the table, but then the return fire really starts causing them a lot of problems. By having the Aegis Defense Line, you can ensure that your Scion Deathball can survive for multiple turns. And if your Scion Deathball is even remotely active beyond that first turn that they step out, you are going to just be picking up the enemy army by the handfuls. And if I might continue down this rabbit hole for just another couple of minutes, guys, I think that you could combine the Scion Deathball with the Aegis Defense Line with the Laws of Command to make a truly top tier combination. You see, the Scion Deathball, when it steps out and it does that blistering amount of damage, you tend to give them the take aim order. This is because it allows your Scions to hit on 2s, rerolling 1s, which is really, really, really nice. The problem is that this means that they suddenly become a very high priority target to your opponent and they get blown away because, like I said, a toughness 3 guy with a 4+ save with no other kind of defensive benefits really isn't all that much to write home about. However, if you took the Laws of Command, this allows you to do an order in your opponent's turn. And you can do it at any point, and that order can be take aim. So suddenly what happens is you step out in your turn, you blast the enemy, you then return fire comes in, and when your opponent gets their shooting phase, you go, hang on, I'm going to use my Laws of Command once per game, and I'm going to go from having take aim on these Scions, in your turn I'm going to have take cover. Suddenly, those Scions go from having a 4+ save and a prayer to the Emperor to a 3+ save, reducing the incoming AP by 1, and they've also got -1 to hit modifier. That's going to mean that more of your Scions should stick around, and therefore you can use the Scion Deathball for multiple turns. Also, I don't mean to alarm anyone, but the Scion stratagem, Immovable Indoctrination, gives them more Armor of Contempt. It again says reduce the incoming AP characteristic of any attacks by 1 to a minimum of 0. As far as I can tell, there's nothing that says these 2 abilities, Reinforced Construction from the Aegis Defense Line and Immovable Indoctrination, can't stack. That would mean that your Scions would be able to ignore all AP -1 and AP -2 attacks, and they'd be on a 3+ save the entire time. And Immovable Indoctrination also means that you can't reroll wounds against them. Overall, it would make your Scions incredibly durable, and they would be really difficult for opponents to deal with. And I think that over the course of a couple of shooting phases, your Scion Deathball could win you the game quite easily. The crazy thing is that all of this stuff has been available since the Guard Codex was released, but people just seem to have dismissed it, and there's a very good reason for that. Fortifications used to be awful. You see, fortifications used to have loads of rules and regulations which made it almost impossible, or at the very least improbable, that you were ever going to want to use them in your army. First up, they used to have to be taken in a separate detachment. You had to put them in a special fortifications detachment, and in 9th edition, where you were limited to only 3 detachments, and also you had to spend CP to take extra detachments, no one was willing to spend one of their precious detachment slots or spend their precious CP on taking a bunch of fortifications, which they might not even be able to use in their games. And why wouldn't they be able to use them in their games? Well, fortifications used to have a rule where they could not be deployed within 6 inches of another terrain feature. And if you could not deploy them, then they were frankly just destroyed. They were a waste of time. So if you went and spent 100 points on a bastion or something and you couldn't deploy it, then your bastion just got destroyed and you were basically starting a 2,000 point game with 1,900 points. These kind of problems have been around since 8th edition. And so for 5 or 6 years, players have just got it into their head that fortifications are kind of dog shit. At the same time, GW has pulled a lot of support for them, so you will actually struggle to find the models being sold by GW directly. But all of that has now changed with Arks of Omen. You see, in Arks of Omen, everyone takes a single Arks of Omen detachment. And within that detachment, you have the ability to take up to 0 to 3 fortifications. Suddenly, no longer do you need to spend extra CP to take them. Suddenly, as a guard player, you no longer need to take one of your precious battalion detachments and turn it into a fortification detachment. No, 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 no. All of a sudden, you can take fortifications in your army incredibly easily. It's not cost you any CP, and it's all going to fit inside your single Arks of Omen detachment. And because they've got their own unit type slots, they're not competing with anything like heavy supports or elites or anything like that. They've got their own special area, and it's really easy to access that. Firstly, they reduced the distance that you had to stay away from other terrain features down to 3 inches. This made it much easier to be able to squeeze in your fortifications alongside the other dense terrain you are likely to find on your competitive 40k boards. Side note, the density of terrain in Warhammer 40k has been a big part of 9th edition, and it was another factor that made taking fortifications so difficult. Most games were so filled with ruins and forests and all sorts of other stuff that you could just never find a slot to place down that Age of Defense line. And to be honest, this hasn't changed. But what has changed is a special new little rule added into Arks of Omen, which says that if you can't deploy your fortification, rather than it being destroyed, you may remove one terrain feature in your deployment zone and replace it with your fortification. This means that there's almost no scenario where you're not going to be able to put down your fortification. And especially when it comes to the Age Defense line, it's a pretty thin line. You should be able to keep it 3 inches away from any terrain features anyway. But if you find yourself playing on a particularly dense board or your deployment zone is just a bit too chock-a-block, you can end up removing a terrain feature and putting the Age Defense line down. Now, a lot of competitive players are going to hear that and go, Mordian Glory, that's a bloody death sentence. You need as much landslide blocking terrain in your deployment zone as possible. Otherwise, how can you withstand the turn 1 alpha strikes? Most armies in 40k, when you look at them on a competitive board, will deploy entirely hidden behind big L-shaped ruins. I actually completely agree with this sentiment, and I would strongly encourage anyone watching this video to think of the Aegis defense line as a supplement to the L-shaped ruins that you're likely to find in your deployment zone, not to replace them. But if you do find yourself in a situation where you can replace one of your ruins, think about doing it. One of the problems that Guard has is maneuvering around those big ruins. And if you're able to remove a big piece of terrain from your deployment zone, you're still going to be able to maintain quite the strong defensive posture with all the defensive rules we've talked about, but it also might seriously open up the ability for you to maneuver around with your vehicles. Leman Russes, Rogel Dawns, Baneblades, all of these vehicles can have a really difficult time getting channeled and funneled down fire lanes and movement corridors. It might be a little bit 4D chess, it might be a little bit too big brain, maybe my Ogre brain is fine developing a wrinkle, I don't know. But I definitely think there is some tactical play there and some big brain maneuvers for you to be able to remove terrain to open up options for movement channels. However, tactically speaking, I think there are 2 main ways of using your Aegis defense line. First up, home defense. I've mentioned before that you could use this to cover a home objective and be able to get a decent fire base setup with something like a Scion Death Ball. A lot of objectives in your home territory, you'll always find that you have a home objective in your deployment zone. In competitive games, they do tend to be covered by an L-shaped ruin. This is great. It allows you to hide your units and hold the objective. Problem is, though, that the units that you're hiding on the objective can't contribute to the fight. By taking an Aegis defense line, you will more than likely be able to have multiple units holding your objective and still being able to provide good long-range fire support. Suddenly you've not got 100, 150 points to your army sat around doing nothing. They're both holding objective and contributing to the war effort. But me personally, I think the Aegis defense line is really good at providing defensive bonuses to those remnant units. And what do I mean by remnant units? Whenever I deploy in Warhammer 40k, I always find that I'm able to cram about 60 to 75% of my army behind the L-shaped ruins. it tends to be that my Leman Russes go behind there. Then I have my Scions, my other elite units. But typically, my line infantry tends to get stuck out in the open. Even if I'm really careful and I cram as much as possible behind the line of sight blocking stuff, there still tends to be 40 or 50 infantry which are out in the open. And to try and protect them, I have to do one of two things. I either have to just not protect them and be like, right, you guys are sacrificial. You're just going to go at the front and try and be a bit of a speed bump. Or I'm like, right, I'm going to backline them. They're going to be within line of sight, but I'm going to literally backline them so the opponent won't be physically in range. Both of these have their disadvantages. Having units backlined, especially if they're infantry, means that typically they can take a couple of turns just moving to get into the fight. That means it's a couple of turns where they're not fighting. Also, by putting them on the front line, it means that they're more than likely just going to die. And again, if my opponent gets turn 1, I'm going to be in a situation where he picks up 2 or 3 infantry squads, and I'm suddenly starting a 2,000 point game with only 1,800 points. That's a big disadvantage for me. Having an aged defense line just completely negates those problems. Suddenly, I'm able to frontline my infantry, so they're able to get in the fight from the very beginning, and they're able to be protected. And again, if I'm using something like the Laws of Command, I can happily use Take Cover if my opponent gets turn 1, and really just make those infantry very, very durable. Taking this a step further, most enemy players, when they see a bunch of units that are out in the open, won't be able to stop themselves from going after them. And if your opponent sees 40 infantry, which is not an insignificant amount, well, not insignificant to other armies, to me and you other guard players, losing 40 infantry in a turn is just Tuesday, am I right? But for a lot of players, they'll see those 40 infantry and they'll get tunnel vision. And they'll go, right, I can take 40 infantry out of the game straight away. That's going to reduce his OBSEC. I'm going to have a great time. Surely he won't be able to recover from such bombastic losses. And they'll fly out. And if they come flying at you and they expose their army, and then all they do is kill 10, at best 20 infantry, suddenly they have put themselves in a really horrible position. And when you come out turn 1, you're able to just blow them off the table. So I think not only is it good in a defensive way, but it's also good for the old bait and switch. Now, at this point in the video, some of you might be convinced about the aged defense line, but you're going to be thinking to yourself, what about the points cost? Because no matter how good this thing is, I'm not going to take it if it's going to cost me 100 plus points. There's just no way. But this is it. The aged defense line is unreasonably cheap. It's amazingly cheap. It's 40 points, guys. It's less than an infantry squad. Think about that. Take one less infantry squad and give all of your other infantry mega durability. And the fact that it's only 40 points means that if you wanted to take multiples of them, you could. There's nothing stopping you from taking 3 of these things in your army and it only costing you 120 points. You could create an entire trench network in your deployment zone and you could go over the top and you could really role play your favorite Krieg moments. You could be like, this is Rax, baby! Now, taking aside the meme aspect, I don't think you're going to want to take 3 of them. I don't think you're going to want to take 2 of them. I think 1 of them is fine. One aged defense line, realistically, I think, can add a lot to your force. By being so cheap, it really is just so accessible. Let me put it to you this way. How many times have you got to the end of an army list and you find yourself with 30, 40 points left over and you think, oh, I don't really know what to do with it. I'll just stack on a bunch of heavy stubbers and armored tracks and I might give my officer like a power fist or something. That's 40 points that you've basically put into fluff upgrades. What if instead you put it into the aged defense line? Another way of looking at this is, would you rather have a commissar who is a single man or take an aged defense line which could protect dozens of your infantry? They are the same points cost. And it's because of how cheap and easily accessible the aged defense line is that I think it probably is an auto-include for most guard players. You could do a lot worse than just chucking in an aged defense line into every single one of your lists. But all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Are you team aged defense line or do you think it actually is just a bit of a meme unit? If you have enjoyed today's video, make sure you smash that like button like it is a big titty out our girlfriend and also subscribe to never miss an episode. If you have found today's video particularly fun or informative, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. By becoming a supporter, you will gain access to the Morning Glory Discord server, which is an online community of over 1,000 active members. It has exploded over the last 6 months and is always popping off in the Mordy and Glory Discord. We have got a tactics section, a strategy section, army list help, hobbying, painting, and we've even got a pretty spicy meme channel as well. And I just want to take a quick moment now to say thank you to all of the latest channel members. So thank you to Jesse Burnett, Wimmy Wham, Brandon DeBin, Brian Moore, Martin Loring, Hadrian, Ben Price, Spencer Smith, Quincy Kunz, Ray Toller, Ventress Dark, The Bandit Cat, Jimmy Hansen, and the Ill-Tempered Fireblade. Thank you guys for doing your part. I also want to do a shout out to the latest Patreon supporters as well. So a massive thank you to Jack Attack, Atin, Blark, Nowgluder, Steel X Spider, Tiki the Hut, Zabras, and Mark Allen. And last, but certainly not least, I want to say a personal, special, heartfelt thank you to all of my top tier Patreon supporters. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a massive thank you to Alan Blunt III, Bon Vert, Mark Panconi, Ridemaster 134-1, Ross Miller, Swordfish Trombone, Zabras, Alex Dengal, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, Tao Tom, and Sly Varney. Thank you to all of you guys. Your incredibly generous support is a massive help, and it really does allow us to create more videos over here on the Mordy and Glory channel. Thank you so much. But that's all for now. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.